So glad to have you here, and I'm sure people will be coming in over the next few minutes, but I thought I would kick off this event, which I'm very happy to do. My name is Ken Levinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Passive House Network, and this is the first in a series of events with this new focus called PHN DEI, which is really growing out of an ongoing effort at the Passive House Network toward social justice, environmental justice, and a just transition to a green economy and combating climate change. That these issues of social justice are inherently intertwined with the success of sustainability in general. We cannot separate these issues. And this has been a longstanding belief at the Passive House Network. And today, with this new series, I'm really happy to be joined here with two board members, Derrick Tillman and Eddie Voltaire, who really are making this happen. Sid Tiendrebiogo, who is a student at a NOMA student leader at New York Tech. And it's my pleasure to hand it off to the three of them and to Eddie in particular to finish the introductions to the series and get us started. I will note, and maybe Eddie will reiterate this, but we want people to put questions into the chat throughout this. As Derrick is doing the presentation on this project, we'll be collecting questions, and the three of them will be having a great conversation after the presentation. So without further ado, I'm very happy to hand it off to Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for the introductions, and welcome everybody to Passive House Network's first DEI effort. We look forward to your questions, and we also would like you to also keep in mind that this is the beginning of the series, as Ken mentioned, where we would also hopefully you can share your own DEI efforts with us by emailing us at dei@phnetwork.org. I'm co-moderating today with Sid Tiendrebiogo, and like Ken mentioned, NYT NOMA chapter leader, as well as leading her own DEI efforts on campus between New York and Long Island. Sid has been active in elevating Black voices and bringing the students together. She's a real mobilizer, and she's also graduating this year. Congratulations to you, Sid. All right, and presenting will be Derrick Tillman of Bridging the Gap Development, LLC. And with that said, Derrick, the floor is yours. Unless Sid, you want to add anything?
No. Okay, well, thank you, Eddie, for that introduction. Again, Derrick Tillman, President and CEO of Bridging the Gap Development. We are a real estate development firm founded in 2006, and our mission is to bridge gaps of opportunity, as well as to bridge gaps in development. And you'll get a firsthand view of just how we do that in our work through this presentation. So I want to talk to you all for a few moments about Fifth and Dinwiddie, a project that we're doing here in the city of Pittsburgh. And we're coining it Fifth and Dinwiddie So Far because this is an active project. It is ongoing as we speak. Primarily, my comments will be focused on the east site, which is kind of the gray building to the right, and the west site, which is a mixed-use building on the left that also includes residential. I'll touch on it, but again, primarily focused on the east site. And the east is mixed-use office and retail. Okay. Meet the team, locally based, but we have national expertise. On architecture, we have Evolve EA, as well as GBBN Architects. Urban Design and Engineering, we have Michael Baker International. Community engagement and accounting, we have Cameron Professional Services. Construction, we have Waller Corporation. Legal, Berman and Victor, and our sustainable design consultant, the Oros Group. And representing the developer is myself, Derrick Tillman. This project is actually located in a community called Uptown. Uptown went through a 2-year planning process to develop an EcoInnovation District plan. And this just really shows how our project is in alignment with the EcoInnovation District plan. So first, we're preserving and strengthening the existing community. We're encouraging balanced, equitable, and green development. We're providing multiple choices of mobility, and we're also investing in sustainable infrastructure. Just up the road from us is the Hill District. And depending on who you're talking to, some will say Uptown is actually even part of the Hill District. But this just shows also how our project is in alignment with the Hill District Master Plan. There's economic empowerment as well as commercial development. There's workforce development. We're building upon the African-American legacy. There's community ownership. We're promoting a green and healthy environment. And then there's family-friendly housing without displacement. As this series is really focused on DEI, we really wanted to specify how I have integrated DEI into this project. And it really starts with intentionality. This can't be an afterthought or something we kind of add on to the end, but these decisions were made with intentionality from the beginning. So starting, the project is led by African-American developer. So there's ownership, African-American ownership, as well as wealth creation. And as we think about and thought about DEI, that was really the cornerstone of how can we help to create wealth, not only for ourselves, but also for others. This project is this high-level, top-notch development, sustainable development is being led by a Black developer. As I just touched on, there's alignment with the community's master plan, and this is within a majority Black community. Uptown is mixed, it's the majority Black, and the Hill District is overwhelmingly majority Black community. We're also, as we thought about the team and how I put the team together, we have opportunities both at the firm level for MWBEs, as well as when we work with majority firms, being intentional about opportunities for staff that we're able to work on this project. So that was also a way we embedded DEI into this process. And then as we engage contracts and handed out contracts and even continue to negotiate contracts with all firms, but specifically MBEs, they're substantive contracts. We didn't want just to, be a small contract that can't really make a difference in, in the lives of these businesses that we're working with, that will also have an impact on their employees, and in some cases, even having to bring on additional employees to execute this project. Then I set the tone early to ensure that minority firms were respected by other team members, as well as minority staff, that they had meaningful roles. And this was something that we were intentional about throughout the process. And I've had to reiterate it as well. We sought out MBE firms for select trades to recommend opportunities to be subcontractors. In some cases, I made recommendations. In other cases, we made a direct selection for MBE firm for a specific element in the project. But then beyond the construction, there's post-construction opportunities. Starting with our property management team, both on the commercial side as well as on the residential side. Post-construction contracting opportunities for MWBEs on landscaping, cleaning, and security, just to name a few. And then we really thought, how can we serve the community beyond the construction life cycle? And that's where we came up with the idea to do a training center focused on clean energy jobs. As I mentioned, this is a mixed community. That's a majority Black community just up the road. And we have an opportunity to help them achieve upward mobility via these good paying jobs. And this, as I mentioned, this initiative serves the community beyond the construction life cycle. What kind of clean energy jobs? Teaching folks how to install solar panels, how to install electric vehicle charging stations, how to install solar farms, as well as passive house, teaching introduction to passive house and other forms of sustainable development. We embedded African-American history and culture as a clear indication that Blacks and minorities are welcome here. We have some affordable co-working space and also affordable housing on the west side. It's mixed income, but we have affordable housing. And again, this was a part of our overall DEI strategy. And lastly, this is not our exhaustive list, but these are just some highlights. We're also identifying opportunities for African-American and women-led businesses to lease space in both our retail spaces as well as in our office spaces. So why is this important to me? It really connects back to my upbringing. I grew up in Section 8 housing. I grew up on welfare, and essentially it was poverty, and that poverty was traumatic. I remember days having our lights cut off, or our gas cut off, or our water cut off, and those times were very, very difficult, and it was traumatic. And it has ingrained a passion in me and a desire in me to never have to live under those conditions, but also to help improve conditions for others, just due to my own personal experiences. Also, when I think about DEI, specifically inclusion, you can't not think about racism and institutionalized racism. I've experienced that personally, and that also was traumatic. At some times while I was a student at the University of Pittsburgh, in various professional environments, even currently today in business, but also in lending practices, things like, just various components of the lending practice has been difficult. I know what it's like to be ostracized, disrespected, and counted out, but I've been the underdog who's also achieved impossible things. As I change my family tree, I'm driven to help other Black families achieve their aspirations and also change their family tree. Why this is also important to me, because I'm a man of faith, and my faith calls on me to care about these things, calls on me to care for all people, but including people who come from similar backgrounds as myself. And then lastly, as I think about policy, bad policy is really, in my mind, policy violence, because it inflicts harm and danger on the people and the communities that those policies are enacting. And this is important to me to help end policy violence and advance innovative practices that make a positive impact. This project, Fifth and Dinwiddie East as well as West, is also consistent with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So as we drill into some of the sustainable development components, this is one. No matter if we're talking about affordable and clean energy, investing in sustainable or in innovation, like through the training program that I talked about, focus on clean energy jobs, or really developing sustainable properties, ultimately sustainable communities. This project weaves through all these different components, really with intentional action around reducing fuel poverty, as well as advancing equitable indoor air quality. This project is certified, is going to be a certified passive house project. We actually have already received the certification. For those that may not be familiar, I know a lot of you are, passive house reduces energy costs by north of 70%. It focuses on things like thermal comfort, and it's really a game changer, when we think about sustainable development. The project will be Fitwel certified. Fitwel is based on public health research. It reduces morbidity and absenteeism. It supports social equity for vulnerable populations. And it really is a standard that helps redefine what it means to live in a healthy building. And then we'll be Reset Air certified. Reset Air focuses on equitable indoor air quality. And then we're compliant with the other items you see here below, MWBE, as well as well building, et cetera. So why Passive House? Really, it connects back to my personal story. It connects back to, that's really where it starts, my upbringing. Remembering those days of, not having heat or electricity. Well, for me, Passive House is the answer because it minimizes the energy cost burden. Just thinking about, if we lived in a passive house and how those lower utility bills would have made a huge difference, growing up, with my mom and my siblings. Thinking about, passive house and how it would have really helped when she had to make a decision of, do I pay the gas bill or buy school clothes? So that's why this is important to me. It also raises the bar from a sustainability perspective. It does the opposite of harmful environmental justice policies and development practices. As I mentioned, it's really a thermally comfortable environment. Once you're in a passive house building or house, you will notice the difference, and you don't have hot and cold areas. It's really a neutral, thermally comfortable environment. Equitable indoor air quality. This has been a problem that has plagued Black communities for decades, for centuries. And Passive House not only doesn't do that, but it raises the bar. It's also better, more quality construction. It allows us to reimagine what it means to live in a healthy environment. And then from a developer's perspective, it also is a competitive advantage. Helps with marketing, being able to tell about some of these things that we offer within our development. Passive House, as I mentioned, it lowers operational costs for the developer as well, which ultimately increases the value of the asset or assets over time. And it allows me to lead and help to shape development in Pittsburgh as well as beyond. At Bridging the Gap, as I talked about our mission to bridge gaps of opportunity and bridge gaps in development, ultimately, we're not just building beautiful buildings. We're also building people, which ultimately build stronger communities. So I talked about our commitment to providing opportunities for MWBEs as we've launched this project with our team that we've selected. One of them team members was Waller Corporation, which is an MBE general contractor that we hired for this $15 million development project. So overall, in addition, this project has really intentional, comprehensive, equitable development practices. For one, we're restoring an underutilized public works building. We're adding an addition that's doubling the building's area. We're helping to revitalize this commercial corridor with new construction of a major mixed-use development that includes residential, retail, commercial, as well as a public plaza that will really bring people together and provide community. It's high-quality design and construction, and then opportunities for small businesses as well as other organizations and stakeholders, and of course, jobs for local residents. Additionally, there's retail that everyone can get excited about supporting. We have some great retailers that will be a part of this project, and we're excited to be able to support those local small businesses. I talked about the workforce development training. We're doing a public plaza. I'll show you some renderings in a moment, but that public plaza helps connect the community while also promoting community health and wellness. We've engaged local artists to showcase public art. And then this is a multiplier as it will provide property tax dollars, both as well as other type of taxes relative to employee wage taxes, et cetera. So ultimately, it's a benefit to the community as well as the city at large. And then the project is development without displacement, both on the commercial side as well as the residential side. So here is the location. This is the east site. This is the west site, right on the corner of Fifth and Dinwiddie, which is why we named it this. Just down the road is downtown Pittsburgh. And just up the road this way, you go into Oakland. Oakland and downtown Pittsburgh is the city of Pittsburgh's two biggest economic generators, with our corporate community as well as our university community, primarily in Oakland. And then just south of us is also Duquesne University. So we're really situated in a great area that has a lot of opportunity, and we're able to connect people to talent easily. They're building a major BRT, which stands for Bus Rapid Transit, that will go along this fairwell, and it will connect folks to Oakland and downtown very easily. And then there's major hospitals being developed, in addition to this being located in an opportunity zone, a Keystone Innovation Zone, as well as other designations that will just be helpful for small businesses, et cetera. So this is this site plan kind of more localized. You see the existing building, as well as a lot which we're building in addition. So it's an adaptive reuse of this existing building and building an addition onto it. And then community connection, as we will have a public plaza, but also a public terrace, which ultimately is intended to bring people together and provide community. This just shows kind of another view of that site plan. This shows a site plan of both the east site and the west site. But what I want to focus here is this public plaza that starts on the east site, the public terrace here, but then it extends all the way to the west side in this alleyway, which we're really helping to revitalize as well, and have a really complete street and a complete development that also extends our public plaza area. So here are some renderings of that public rail. Again, in the purple, you see kind of the plaza along our way. The orange is the Fifth Avenue Transit Plaza, but these just show some renderings of, we'll have outdoor seating for some of our restaurants, places to have outdoor events, working with local organizations to do a lot of community programming for families, as well as other specialized events that we'll have over time. So this is the existing building that I talked about. This is 20,000 square feet. We're also adding a 20,000 square foot addition. So in total, this property will be 40,000 square feet. It will include office space, co-working space, as well as training space. So actually, let me show you a rendering of the completed project. So again, here's that renovation of the existing building. Here's the 20,000 square foot addition I talked about. And on these upper floors will be all office space. We have embed in one of these office suites, co-working space for small businesses. Here will be retail. So we'll have a coffee shop here. And then that training space in this high bay industrial space on this first level. Actually 7,000 square feet dedicated to that training. Here's a Fifth Avenue view. You can see the BRT, kind of the lane that will come directly down, and it'll stop right here. So just kind of show you how accessible and transit oriented this development will be. And this also gives you an idea of the impact and the scale that this development will have on this commercial corridor. Here is a view of the Dinwiddie side, kind of the rear of the building. And this is a location where we'll work with the local public artists to embed that into the site. And then you can see the steps that lead up to this public terrace area as well. As I talked about early in the presentation, with integrated public art, you can see the locations where we're going to have this public art. We went through a RFP process to select a local artist, and we landed on Mo and Charlotte Koch, who are historians, artists, as well as musicians, Mo specifically as a musician. And Mo actually learned to play jazz in this alleyway called Our Way. And we're excited about being able to integrate his personal story into this place. And he created a piece called Play That Number Man, right? I think it was kind of coined after one of his favorite songs. And with that, that's actually one of the pieces that we're going to embed into the development. It will be on the west side. But again, all these places are places where we're going to integrate public art. Again, as a reminder of celebrating culture as opposed to race and culture. Just another way that we're embedding DEI into this development. Here is a picture of that piece called Play That Number Man. And this will be kind of computerized and fabricated onto the building. So it's a really, really awesome design, when it will be complete. So lastly, this just kind of gives you an idea of the scale that development from the east and the west will have on this corridor. And here are some updated renderings of the east and west. So with that, I will stop and kind of pass things over to Eddie and Sid to open us up with Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Derrick, for an incredible presentation. I gotta say, you make it look so easy to pull off, addressing all of these issues, right? One thing that you said that really stuck out with me is this idea of policy violence, right? It speaks to a lot of the issues that you face as a developer when you're trying to incorporate DEI efforts into any particular project, addressing spatial inequalities through the one-way in this in-between space that you're creating, right? That's allowing the community to have a sense of belonging, right? You also mentioned upward mobility and economic growth, which I understand is kind of difficult to do with affordable housing because technically you don't own the spaces that you're renting. But Passive House actually solves that problem where it's reducing so much of the costs that's associated with rental properties that you actually can have upward mobility within that framework. And I commend you for that. So with that being said, what were your major obstacles that you faced?
Sure. So we faced quite a bit of obstacles. I think starting out was zoning challenges, and really just kind of getting the process through all the necessary entitlement processes. Financing has been a major challenge with the project, especially thinking about the impact that COVID has had on this development at large, but also rate increases with Fannie and Freddie Mae rate increases kind of created, financing challenge with the project. So those are just some challenges that we've kind of faced with the project. But there were several others, but that gives you an idea of a few.
Mm-hmm. Now, in previous conversations, we spoke about the percentage of affordable housing created on this project, and you actually did something that most developers wouldn't do. You increased the amount of affordable housing on this particular project, and that's bold. And in doing so, I'm curious to know, and I'm sure there's other people that's wondering, how did that affect your financing? Like you mentioned, it's not easy to get financing for particular projects, in particular projects where people might not understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? There's a lot of intangible value that's added through adding these social values that you've incorporated into this project. Right. Increasing your affordable housing on this particular project, what were the obstacles or the challenges that you came across, between your financing team, your design team? How did you come about that conclusion?
So I think part of it is being connected to the community that we're in. You know, I had built relationships with this community prior to pursuing development. I actually also used to live in the Hill District. So I understood on the ground the challenges that the community was already facing. Additionally, you know, I understand in the city at large, and this is not just a Pittsburgh problem, it's kind of a national problem as it relates to, you know, affordable housing crisis and affordable housing shortage. So here I am, you know, as a developer, only being required to do 10% affordable housing, but I just didn't feel like that was socially responsible. And knowing that our city is specifically even in this area needed more affordable housing, I wanted to really push the envelope to help to make that happen, and essentially help bridge another gap. So those were some of the things that weaved in the decision. The next thing was, well, financing. How do we make this work? Because, you know, with market rate, you have higher rents, therefore you can basically leverage the project more, get more debt, et cetera. And with lower rents, it decreases, you know, the amount that you can get in the form of a loan or even equity. So that requires additional subsidy. So we were able to get additional subsidy in the form of tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, but that wasn't enough. So we had to apply for other subsidies to help make the project financially feasible. That included state funding resources, as well as some additional local funding resources. For example, the Housing Opportunity Fund is just one example. And then working with our local agency, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, to also identify additional soft funds to help make the project work and happen. But those were, and then finding loans and lenders that had more competitive rates. So really being intentional about finding those products and those loan products that would allow us to, you know, be able to have more affordable housing as well. So I think that was another thing that, you know, we had to be intentional about. But that created challenges because all these separate funding streams makes the project a lot more complicated to execute. Every single funding stream has a separate application, has a separate process, has separate requirements, has separate reviews, separate approvals, separate underwriting. So we really made our job much harder by having this type of intentionality and this type of focus on increasing affordable housing, on ultimately DEI efforts. But we knew it was the right thing to do. And we knew that, you know, this community as well as the city at large needed it. So we were up for the challenge. The other thing is I knew that figuring it out will create a blueprint for other projects. So because our city gets about 9% tax credits, we're utilizing 4% tax credits. 4% has been an underutilized resource in our region. And we only get about 4 or 5 9% tax credits per year. And that equates to about maybe 300 to 400 units. We have a 17,000 unit crisis. We're never going to get there on 4 to 5 projects a year. So we need other types of innovative ways to help bridge that gap. And I think this is one of them. So we were willing to take on the challenge to help blaze a trail, not only for us and future projects, but also for other developers.
I like the concept of creating this blueprint for others to follow. Now, there's a certain degree of difficulty that comes with working and engaging communities, in particular with large-scale developments such as the one that you're working on, where communities don't feel this sense of belonging. They're not part of the design process, which is critical to any DEI effort, right? To give the community a voice and input in the project. At what point in this project were you able to pull in the community? and bring them to the table to have that discussion?
Very early on, this project went through a very robust community engagement process. There was an RFP to actually be selected for the site and the development. And even through the RFP process, you actually had to present to the community your plan, your project, how it was, in alignment with the EcoInnovation District plan, et cetera. So we started from that point. But again, as I said, I had already been building relationships, had already understood what this community had needed. So really my community engagement started even before the RFP came out. But then once the RFP came out through that process, and then we had at least 8 other community engagement meetings that embed them into the design process. There were some ideas that we were able to bake in, or some things that we could not do. Just that process was iterative on multiple different levels with the community, as well as with with our city at large, as far as going through the approval process. So there were various touch points where we engaged the community, got feedback, and ultimately it brought about a better project.
Got it. Now, Sid, I know you had a couple of questions when we spoke about this project. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so we actually got a couple questions in the chat, so we're gonna go over those a little bit before we hop into more. So you're being asked if you could talk about the integration of art in the project design and what made you do that, and why these artists, besides the story, obviously, of literally learning how to play jazz in this particular building.
Sure. So I think culture is important when we think about development, and even specifically this topic, DEI. When you have development, even if it's an existing building, maybe there's culture embedded into that. It can be art, it can be the retail establishments that are there, and then you have basically a new plan that comes and erases that, sends a message to the community that you're not welcome there. Development is needed. So even if it's a new development, how do we be intentional about embedding that culture in, as opposed to erasing it? So what we wanted to do was to embed that culture, embed that art into the project, so that this is a mixed income development. We want African Americans to understand and to know that they're welcome here. So that was an intentional decision. Why these artists? Again, we went through an RFP process. I really connected with the story. And this is Pittsburgh is really a jazz mecca. When you understand the history, connection of jazz and Hill District, et cetera. So it really was it made sense for a lot of different reasons, and it connected a lot of dots for me. My personal history, the gentleman's personal history, Mo, as well as the history of the community at large, and even in Uptown. It really allowed us to kind of celebrate the past as we blaze, toward the future.
Now that's interesting, right? Because a lot of times with development, what you have is this erasure of identity of communities. The fact that the level of intentionality that you approach your projects with speaks in volumes to this preservation of this community's history, right? And allowing it to regenerate itself and build itself anew. There's a question in the chat that I like to ask you, which is particularly interesting to me, especially when you think about the future uses of technology and incorporating it into your projects. What innovations on the technology side, whether IT or AI, have you looked into?
Sure. So this project, really is bridging another gap at the intersection of building science and data science. Building science around passive house, sustainable practices that I talked about. But then the data science side is, these aren't just aspirational goals that we don't really have any clue if it's working. We'll be able to measure just how efficient the building is, for example. And we'll have the technology that communicates with the building to measure the air quality. To also embed it to our security. Really an integrated system that allows the building science and the data science to work together, but also for me as a developer to know that I got what I paid for. So that's one element. We're incorporating electric vehicle charging stations. This is an all electric building. So we're definitely reducing the carbon footprint. We'll have solar panels. We'll have electric vehicle charging stations. So I think those are some of the main elements where we've incorporated technology, into the project and into the development site.
I feel like that, well, going back to like the earlier point, relates to what the difference would be with enhancing the community versus gentrifying it. Taking into account the fact that there is history, these are landmarks, and these really do matter to the community. And I like the fact that you preserve the facade of the building. It does help minimize cost and a lot of things in the future. What are kind of some of the laws that would prevent us? We're currently working on zoning, but in New York, so that's kind of a little bit outside of my full understanding. What kind of zoning laws, issues did you have to face in like trying to get some of these things, even as something as simple as adding a mural to something, whether it just be the zoning, the financial, like what kind of issues did you have to, what kind of hoops did you have to jump through to get this done?
That you have time? No, just playing. There were just a lot of things, and I want to just shout out the team that I mentioned at the beginning, because they were instrumental in helping us to kind of get through all of the different approval processes. But I think even getting the fire code to recognize the west side specifically as kind of one building, because it's one building connected by a sky bridge. But there were just challenges around that. We had to convene a meeting with the fire chief and the city's zoning folks, and the lot consolidation folks, and city planning, to really just kind of have a meeting of the minds of how we want to proceed, and really have everyone be comfortable with what we were doing. That presented tons of challenges, and just meetings and workarounds and different things of that nature. Utilities, just with our light company, of where certain things are going to be located. There was a lot of challenges with getting approvals with that. There were just multiple things, but I think that gives you an idea. The other is this was a big challenge to build the sky bridge, and this is again mainly the west side, but I'm answering the question in the context of the whole site, because zoning really relates to the whole site as opposed to just east. But to build the sky bridge over our way, really require a special exception to be able to do that, because that's still a public area. It's a public area, so that had to get a public right-of-way approval, and that was also just kind of something else challenging to work through. I think on the east side specifically, there is some selective demo. We're maintaining the buildings, the existing building, but there's certain parts of the facade and then just kind of gutting the inside. But how do we essentially maintain that and then gut everything out of it and not compromise the integrity and the structure of the existing building? So that's just been a challenge from a structural engineering perspective and a demo perspective to, really come up with a plan that will work, that's practical, actually in the field, and that's safe. So those are some of the things that we kind of had to endure.
I believe in the chat earlier, it was asked, how do you go about finding these locations and picking these projects?
Sure. So relationship is a key component. I didn't mention early, but I growing up, we also moved a lot. So I lived all over the city, probably 12 different neighborhoods in different parts of the city. And I used to see that as a negative kind of growing up, had to make new friends and, just always going to new environments. But now that actually serves me because it gave me an affinity and an understanding of different neighborhood dynamics. I have a lived experience that most people don't have in all these different communities, but it also helps from a relationships perspective. We have a good name as well as a company. So when folks are looking to sell sites or do innovative things, oftentimes we'll get a call. But I think that goes back to childhood, but also goes to just the reputation we built. But then outside of that, we just like anyone else, we may work with we actually have a commercial real estate firm, a commercial brokerage firm that negotiates, contracts for us for sites that are maybe listed on the market. And then, referrals. And then lastly, public land. So identifying opportunities to develop on public land, whether it's currently for sale or going through an RFP process, or we may initiate, actually that action as well. But those are some of the ways we find sites.
Now, Pittsburgh is not as cannibalistic as New York City is, meaning that you have to destroy in order to build, right? There's not a lot of open land to develop on. And it makes me wonder, with a project such as yours, what was the competition that you faced, the opposition in actually getting this site to develop this project when you presented it to who you have to present it to in comparison to the others? How did you end up the developer for this particular project?
Sure. So from what I recall, there were two other teams that got shortlisted. I'm not sure how many in total responded to this RFP, but there were at least two other teams that got shortlisted. And I think we had a dream team. I put together a dream team to respond to this project. We had a project that understood the community dynamics, a project that responded to what the community needed from a mixed income housing perspective. We responded on the commercial side because there's a lack of office space, and then also we responded because not everyone can afford, market rate commercial rent either. So we responded to have space that allowed opportunities for kind of smaller companies to be in this amazing new development. And then we had a public space that said this isn't just a private development off to the side that no one is welcome in, but we actually had a public space that really allowed for the public to enjoy this development, even if you're not leasing space or renting an apartment here, that you can come here, you can go to the coffee shop, you can go to one of our restaurants, you can take an exercise class or or what have you, or come to a public event that we're doing in partnership with the local neighborhood community organization. So I think because of our project's responsiveness to the needs of the community, but it also made sense from a financial perspective. So being able to weave through those worlds was huge, and we just had a better project, you know.
I feel like everything that you were saying is that you really embody the essence of what real mixed housing is. I say mixed housing, mixed usage is. Incorporating all of these different factors definitely is winner. Just involve the community too.
Absolutely.
Question in the chat that says, what strategies are you using or seeing to improve the pipeline of talent so it's more reflective of society for design professionals, finance developers, GCs, and trades? And there's an example. I hear claims from A&E firms that they struggle with the current pipeline as not being as rich or plentiful as it should be. And this is a barrier to rebalancing the diversifying firms.
Yeah, great question. So, you know, this is a thing that is going to take all of us to resolve. We're doing our part, but we can't, you know, move this needle solely. So one thing is this is an example. Hopefully it's an example. Hopefully it's a form of inspiration, as well as, you know, some things that can be drawn from what we did here, how DEI can be done in other environments and other spaces. And it's not just development. Some of the things, how we were intentional to make sure that the minorities on the team were respected by everybody else, you know, on the team. That can happen in majority architecture and engineering firms. That, you know, when you bring on minorities, making sure that they have a meaningful role, and that they you know, are really working on projects that they're passionate about. And that they're respected within that space, setting that tone earlier. So that's, you know, one thing. You know, we're this is even this session today, and as we look forward in Passive House in this DEI series is really intended to provide some additional ways that others can get involved and you know, grow their DEI efforts. As a developer, I'm constantly speaking about the need for policy changes. I'm constantly advocating to our local elected officials, statewide elected officials, and if I get the chance, federal elected officials, about need for more access to capital. This project has been extremely difficult to finance. It shouldn't have been this difficult considering all the things that we're doing to really move the community forward. We should have ready-made accessible financing for developers like me and for projects like this. So that is something that that can be done and that needs to be done. Again, we're doing our part with advocacy, with recommendations for policy changes. And then, you know, I think everyone has to do their part. You know, looking at your own firm, what DEI efforts are you taking? Whether it's a minority firm or a majority firm, you know, and then, you know, how can you get involved in helping to move this forward? But there's plenty of talent. You said represent organization NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects. There's a plethora of architects and future architects that firms can engage with and identify talent. But then also, you know, we are on a development front working with funds and organizations to also create solutions for things like guarantee requirements, things like helping to build capacity and those things are intended to help to grow the pipeline.
Sid, I like the point that you made about this project embodying what it means to have this mixed use development, right? Where this project it's not a point of extraction. It's actually bringing resources into the community, right? Which to me is super important. And next to that is, how do you pass the baton and ensure that your DEI effort that you set in motion today will still be in existence a year, 5 years down the road, right? Because this project eventually has to be turned over to the community. What are the safeguards that you envision or you have in place to ensure that these DEI efforts just don't disappear?
Well, for this specific project, we're moving our office here, so I'll be in this environment,
So,
you know, for the next 20 years. So I'll be able to be, you know, more connected. You know, as the baton is passed to our property manager, we're actually going to manage the commercial side. So, you know, we're really not passing a baton. It's more or less a baton to another department as opposed to another firm. Now, on the residential side, it will be a separate property management firm. But I think, you know, staying involved, working with team members that understand are on board with our mission and what we're trying to accomplish here, and really staying engaged. You know, having meetings to understand where we're at, what's working, what's not working, and if there's some things that need to be tweaked, we're willing to do that to maintain the essence of what we sought out to do here.
okay. So it sounds to me that there's a lot of bandwidth necessary to keep this DEI effort moving forward, right? A lot of voices have to remain at the table and stay engaged. What are the processes that you have to keep the community engaged? I love the art that's incorporated into the project, right? And I'm wondering, does that art remain the same or does it change, right? How do you continue that engagement? How do you stay at that level of engagement?
I think the relationship doesn't end. It's not transactional for me. So like, oh, we built the development, deuces. No, it's really ongoing relationship. You know, and that is for, you know, what else is needed? How can we bridge another gap in the community? But we already know because we're connected, because we understand what the needs are. We understand because we're a part of the community. So I think that's integral to making sure it continues, is, you know, continuing to maintain those relationships, continue to work with stakeholders for future projects, you know, so that it's not, you know, a transactional relationship that once the project's done, essentially we have no other connection to the community. That's not who we were prior to this project. It's not who we're going to be after this project.
I'm hearing a lot of just make it your mission to be genuine, so you don't even have to worry about not having a relationship later, because that's the point of it. I like the fact that you made sure to mention that it wasn't transactional. You're doing it because this is what you want to do, not because this is something that may profit you later on. And I feel like we need a lot more of that, especially in architecture. Yeah, just overall.
Great point, Sid. Great point, right? Staying intentional, right? Staying intentional. Now, for developers who want to be intentional, but are worried about being profitable, what advice would you give to them?
For developers, can you repeat that again?
For developers who want to be intentional, but are concerned about profitability, you take a lot of risk to push forward your DEI, right? Because you're very intentional. That's clear. But for developers who might not be so willing to take the risk that you take, what advice would you give to them?
Well, I want to first say that we're a for-profit company. We're not a nonprofit. And I think it's a misnomer that you can't be intentional and profitable, that you can't be socially responsible and profitable. I think you can have both, and we lead with that mindset, because if the project's not profitable, then it won't be around. So we have to have those conversations even with the community at times on why we can't do certain things, because although that may be a good idea, it won't pay the bill. So we have to really bridge the gap between the two. And I think my conversation to them would be, you need to make sure that the project is something that will benefit the community, something that will advance the people, but you also need to make sure it's profitable simultaneously. So as you look at those social components, still making sure that the project pencils. It can't be one without the other. And you have developers that are only concerned about profit, or you may have community people that are only concerned about the community side of things and don't understand the business side. And you really kind of need both. So we represent, that entity that essentially bridges that gap.
Thank you, Derrick. And I think that's about our time for today. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Sid, thank you for joining us. I'd like to end by saying that this is very inspiring, right? We want to motivate people to tell their story and bring it out to the table, because I think a lot of the issues that you addressed, there's a lot of concern out there, right, from people who might be listening in, which is why we want people to share their stories, and we could highlight it on forums such as this. Please share your stories on DEI@PHNnetwork.org. Sid, would you like to say anything before we close out?
No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. It was really nice. I really loved the jazz component to everything. Thank you everyone for coming. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Derrick?
Just want to thank you both for just great questions, great moderation. Thank you, Ken, and the Passive House Network. And thank you everyone for coming.